I'm going to pull up a picture of your book. I'm going to pull that up right now, if I can. This is your book right here, A Prisoner's Odyssey. It's right here in the middle of the screen.
Oh, yeah.
This is a book of your experiences in World War II. And for a lot of people that will listen to this, they don't realize your backstory. You were part of the 106th Infantry at the Battle of the Bulge.
Correct.
You were only 19 years of age in 1944.
Correct.
And then on December 21st, if I'm correct, in 1944, you and many others were actually captured. You were a POW behind German lines and at what's now the infamous Siegfried Line. And
That's correct.
You escaped. And can you share some of your experience?
Well, we went into a quiet area. The 28th Division was down to the south, and we held just to the north of them, about 27 miles. And there were 2-mile gaps, and there's a couple of divisions just above of the unit that was above us. That was a cavalry group. The Germans saw that was a weak area. It was weak. They had gaps that they could go through at night, and then nobody would ever know it. But we'd send a patrol every 4 hours into that gap. Well, that big attack then came with about 200,000 troops, and they had over 1,000 tanks. And there's some people couldn't get out of there, and we were surrounded, I think, the first day, according to my cook. So we were never ordered to retreat. We never, but the division below us retreated, and that was the 28th. They went into Bastogne, and 2 days after they attacked, the Germans were down below us about 20 miles to our south and north, and behind us, not below us, but behind us, that's just 20 miles, and that was where they shot up Americans in Malmedy. So we were way isolated, way up there in the front lines. And by the time, after 5 days, and we had no food. I understand we had one clip of ammunition. And we were pretty, we had no medical, just about what was left of us. The officers decided to surrender us. And what they were going to do, the Germans were going to use artillery on our dug-in positions. And we wouldn't have shot or killed a single German, but artillery during World War II killed more infantrymen than rifle bullets did, is what I've been told. So we would have been just setting ducks out there. And they rightfully, I think, surrendered us. I know we didn't like that. My captain didn't like that, but we did. And that began a long march back into Germany. The reason we marched in, we were put in a boxcar, and we got strafed, and a fellow 2 seats next to me in this boxcar was hit, along with quite a few others. And they were evacuated, and the rest of everybody else made a big POW in the snow and notify that airplane that we're Americans down there, and that the airplane waved its wings and went on. But everything that moved and the railroad lines was being shot up by the Allies and the Americans. That was a British plane. So we walked nearly 100 miles back to the Rhine River, where they weren't using aircraft on the Germans at that time, on the ground troops. It put in boxcars again, and from Christmas to got there New Year's Day, and we haven't had a bite to eat. So we were a hardy bunch, but good, strong, young infantry guys can go for a week or more, or 2 weeks without even eating. But we did have a D-bars, and that's about it. But by the time we got back to the prison camp, we felt like near skeletons, and it was that way until we were liberated back in April 1945. And we marched away from. I was with a group that was out digging ditches and farmlands, and that's every day, Sunday, Monday, Saturday, every day. No news, knew nothing what was going on in the war in the world. But I did hear something that sounded like booming, and it was American artillery. It had to be, because the Germans shortly after that got us from a bomb crater that we were filling in, and we were marched us off towards Leipzig. And we didn't know why we didn't go into Leipzig, but we were told, later I found out, the 69th Infantry Division was fighting the Germans in the city, so we had to detour and go up north towards Berlin. We crossed the river and at Ellenberg. And by nightfall, we were in a makeshift fenced area in the forest. Put my coat down like I had one other time, and before I turned around to get it, somebody took it, and that also had all my savings and my Red Cross food in it, and that really just made me mad. So I told my buddy, we're going to get out of here, because I saw that the German guard at the gate was letting out these foreigners to go out and get wood to cook their meals. And I went out to the gate and told we couldn't speak German. He couldn't understand English, but by hands and voice, I let him know we need some firewood to cook our meal. Mm-hmm. And he let us go outside, and instead of getting firewood, we just kept going. And about 4 or 5 days later, we met an infantry patrol of the 69th Infantry Division, and that they put us on their Jeep. They didn't even know us. They drove right down the road while we were on the intersection of a farm road. And finally, the last Jeep turned around, and the sergeant says, "Captain, I told you they were Americans." But we were so excited, we couldn't even say we're Americans. We thought they were going to recognize us and stop. But we were the same clothes we had in December, the same dirty, filthy-looking clothes that we were liberated in April. So you can imagine we looked pretty trampy, all right, and no washing or anything like that. It was great to be headed back home.
So
just to start.
The escape was actually through deception?
Well, yes. Yeah. The escape. Yeah. I think the war was pretty close to the end, and I didn't realize that maybe the Germans weren't anything like they were early on during the war, and maybe they maybe not, but anyway, they didn't. Nobody came running after us, and the day that I escaped, I walked up to a German house. I'd done that when I was before while I was working, and knocked on the door to trade my bread for some bread, loaf of bread, no cigarettes for some bread. Well, the German woman brought back a whole round loaf of bread, and I gave her my cigarettes, and then I'd sneak back into where I was digging, and nobody would catch me. And the only trouble when I got back is that a boy about twice my size, and I looked like he would steal my bread, and I nearly got in a fight with him. And I was desperate. I was going to use my shovel on him. Don't you touch that bread, you know. We were desperate, you know. There was a lot of stealing going on by there was a small group of 100 of us, but there was 95 of us we did not steal, but there was a few that would steal every night, and then I think that might have been one of them. But about after my escape, a couple of nights after, when I went to this second, I tried that again. Well, they called the mayor of the little town, and he came up, and I said, we're caught now. So he took us to the mayor. I mean, the mayor took us down into this little village, and he took us to a hotel, and a big German guy, got a foot or so taller than me and healthy looking. He looked us over, and he asked if we were Americanos, and I nodded my head yes. I'm glad they weren't SS troops, and because they might not want to fool with us, just take us behind the hotel over there and just shoot us. But he let the mayor go with us, and he put us in a haystack down in the middle of this little town, and there we were. And about midnight, some tanks came into town, and they were a bunch of German kids drumming, had voices, had not changed, and they were hollering and brown, and I told Frank, my buddy, we better leave from here, but we waited until nearly daylight, and we got out of that haystack and went back and hid in a barn until we met that division about 5 days later. That was that patrol about 5 days later. So that was was very interesting.
What? Now, recently you have gone back.
Yeah.
For 75th anniversary, I believe. Is that correct?
Well, this past December 75th anniversary.
What was that like?
And I represented, or at least I was the only man of my 17,000 men that comprised the 106th Infantry Division. That's artillery and signal corps and medical and everything. I was the only one that was back celebrating 75 years after the Battle of the Bulge. There were 19 total, 18 other people from other divisions, and we ended up at the National Cemetery in Luxembourg, and we got to shake hands. We were sitting in the front row, and Nancy Pelosi was one of the congressional people that came by us and shook hands. And I didn't recognize that name at first because I couldn't believe anybody from the United States would be there, but not her. I said, where are you from? And she kept saying, I'm Nancy Pelosi. Well, I thought she was an Italian girl somewhere. But anyway, so she got away from me before I could make any other comments. But I met the head of the armed services. I met the King and the Queen of England, and
nice.
And Belgium. I'm not Belgium, and then I met the head of Luxembourg, and they took us, ex-prisoners of war, to his palace and served us orders and drinks, and we were just treated royally. It was just a wonderful time. And I was there with Mike took us over there with another Jesuit graduate and his wife, and they took us to all the different battle places where I was unaware of, but I had read about before that last day, and it was a great thing. Yeah, I loved it, and I'm fortunate that I had good health and feel healthy today.
No doubt.
Sometimes I don't feel. I couldn't coach. I coached. It didn't make any difference. There was no problem with health. It was always 1,000%. Never got sick,
But speaking of health, you're still active track and field wise.